Hi guys, today's YouTube video is all about how to prevent taking your relationship for granted, or if you are now realizing that you have taken your relationship for granted, what you can do to start to reconnect and heal the relationship. Oftentimes this comes up in my practice that couples feel disconnected or they don't feel like they know each other anymore, and it creates a real crisis. So I know I've talked about it in some form or fashion in other videos, but today I just want to really highlight what to do in the midst of, feeling really disconnected, or that you've gotten caught up in this, oh my gosh, we've taken each other for granted and now we're on the brink of a separation or even divorce, and what do we do? So I want to talk about some strategies that I think really help couples kind of come back together and reconnect. And the first thing is understanding that every relationship is at risk. And I'm not saying that to scare you or anything like that, but just to understand it's like everything, anytime we're in a relationship, if we don't take time to really nurture the relationship, or as Gottman says, small things often, we don't take time to nurture the relationship, we're taking the relationship for granted. Now, in this world, we are very busy. We are doing this or that, or, our focus gets shifted in some way. And so we stop paying attention to one another. And then one day we wake up and we realize, like, oh my gosh, who's this person sleeping next to that I'm supposedly married to? I don't know them anymore. And so, those are some danger zones, or danger, waving the red flag to say, hey, we've got to really do something about this. So I think it's, I know you guys have heard this, but really making the relationship a priority. That doesn't mean that everything has to, sometimes everything has to stop and you have to connect to one another, but you can make the relationship a priority simply by just being mindful of how you're connecting to one another every day. As I said earlier, and as I've said in a lot of other videos, Dr. Gottman's, his quote, small things often. What are the small ways that we really turn towards and nurture the relationship every day? So creating rituals of connection is one way that we're really turning towards one another and working on the relationship and making your relationship a priority. Part of it is having a willingness to come together and connect, or, come together and whether you're physically together or even when you're apart, you're still honoring the relationship, and the relationship is, is on the front of your mind. So making decisions that are in reflection of the relationship. And I get we're two individual selves who make up the relationship. The saying, you plus me equals we. I know everybody talks about that, but it's really, what's the we? How are we defining our relationship? What are our beliefs and values that are aligned with the meaning of being in a committed relationship or marriage? And really talking about that with one another and having that deep understanding of your shared meaning system, which is a term that Dr. Gottman uses. What are beliefs and values about marriage or commitment to one another? And how are we really coming together and understanding what our role is when we are honoring the relationship as a partner and or a spouse? So I think it's, when we make our relationship a priority, we make a commitment to check in. We make a commitment to create and practice those rituals of connection. We take time to understand each person's position of how they see the world and how they see themselves in the world and how they see the relationship. Also, when there's conflict, and I know I've talked about conflict a lot in my YouTube videos, when there's conflict, when we make the marriage or the relationship a priority, we have a willingness to listen, to understand each person's perspective instead of just assuming that we're right and assuming the other person is wrong. We have a willingness to say we're committed to working through this, even if we need to take, a 30-minute break. We're committing to come back and talk to one another about how to work through this. So, I think it's creating those rituals, the willingness to understand each other, understanding each other's roles and what your shared meaning system is all important when it comes to how not to take your relationship for granted. Most importantly, as I said in the very beginning of this video, is understanding that your relationship is at risk, not for any reason of just, if we don't take care of something, it won't ever grow. You know, the silly or cheesy metaphor, but it's an important one. If you plant a seed, you have to care for it. When you meet and when you fall in love, everything is great. You know, it's on your mind and you have this like tunnel vision, and then life happens and you can't, you're distracted. And so it's, how do you come back and water the plant, water the seed so it continues to grow? Using love languages. I know I did a video on identifying what your love languages are. That's one way that you water. There was a book that I used to read to my kids. It was a little critter book. I don't know if anyone knows it, but it was about a garden. And there was a saying that it was, you plant a seed and then you weed, water, and wait. And whether you want to use that metaphor or not, I think it's a good one. You know, when you're in a relationship, you plant a seed, and it's a commitment of we. You know, you're planting this you're planting this relationship. And, you know, you have to take care of it. You have to weed and water this relationship so it grows into this beautiful tree, you know, or flower, or whatever plant that you're planting. It grows into this beautiful relationship of, of understanding, of love, of commitment, of trust, of, creating those shared beliefs and values. And you grow as a part of that in that relationship as well. And, sometimes it is waiting, the last part of that, weed, water, waiting, but waiting for it to grow. And what I'll say in that is, part of not taking your relationship for granted isn't necessarily waiting around and seeing if it works. It's taking action. How am I showing up to my relationship, ready and willing to work towards creating and cultivating and staying connected in it? And so that is really important. How am I willing to show up and work on this relationship even when things are going well? It's usually when things are going well that we end up taking shortcuts, and that's when things start to crumble a little bit. So even when you're, planting those flowers or planting that garden or planting your relationship, if you have one day where it's like, oh, the flower finally blossomed, so I'm not going to water it anymore. Guess what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen. And that's our relationship. We have to, continue to nurture and care for it even when things are going well. And how do we do that? As I've said before, we create those rituals of connection. We create the date night. We create fun and play in our relationship. We create time to talk about when things aren't going well. We create rituals not only around how to connect, but even rituals of how do we work through conflict when it comes up. All of those things are important. So it's the definition of marriage, or how do we define us as a couple? How do we define our individual selves as a couple also? So it's like our you plus me equals we. This is who I am as an individual, and how and what we bring to the table, and this is how we define us. And I think all of that is a great way to say this is how we continue to nurture and honor our relationship, and connect to one another every day so we don't take it for granted. So we plant the seed, and we've got to make sure that we're taking action by, weed and watering our relationship seed so it continues to grow into what we want it to be. All right, guys, have a beautiful day. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for weekly updates all about relationships.